Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 22nd September 2016 meeting of the Beachside Redevelopment Board. We're happy to have you here tonight. Mrs. Groom, would you please call roll call, please?
Ms. Ramsey? Here. Ms. Phillips?
Here.
Ms. Miller? Here. Ms. Cantrell?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Ms. Chapin?
Yeah.
Ms. Maillard?
Here. Approval of the minute, please. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. McDonald to review the procedure for tonight's meeting. Please.
Anyone wishing to speak tonight is required to fill out a green form to speak before the Beachside Board. The green forms are located next to the Board Secretary in this room. You must complete the sections that ask for your name, address, topic of conversation, agenda item number, signature, and date. All citizens completing a green form will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. When you approach the lectern, please speak clearly into the microphone and state your full name and address. The 3-minute clock is on the monitor directly in front of you and will continue to run while you speak. Please pay close attention to your time. You will be told when your time has expired. Section 62-38 of the City Code of Ordinances makes it unlawful for any person to behave in a riotous or disorderly manner in any public meeting or to cause any unnecessary disturbances therein by force, shouting, or any other action calculated to disrupt such meeting, or to refuse to obey any ruling of the presiding officer of such meeting relative to the orderly process thereof. Please silence all cell phones and other wireless devices during this meeting. All conversations must take place either at the lectern or on the dais so that everyone can hear the business being discussed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Tonight we have 2 action items for consideration. They will be presented together and voted separately. We will follow the LDC, where jurisdictional public hearing. First, we will hear from the city staff and then from the applicant. Thereafter, we will hear from anyone claimed to be affected parties. For there, it will be public comment, response, and presentation or comment by the applicant, affected parties, and city staff, then conclusion. At this time, I will close the public hearing. The board will determine and make recommendation on each item separately.
Chair, may I make a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes,
I'll second.
I second it. Approve the minute for minute approved. All in favor say aye.
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 All say nay. Minute approved.
So you can call the items 4 and 5 together? And
Yeah.
then
I think we have the staff presentation first.
Okay. We're going to do this. We're going to review both of these reports together, both cases. Yeah. So I'm going to read what those are. If you could pull up the first case, please. And the first slide on the first case, number 4.
Is that one more?
Next, please. There you go. Thank you. That is number 4 is a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment. It's the Longboard DEV 2016-081. It's a legislative hearing. This is a request by Robert A. Merrill III, Esquire, Cobb Cole, on behalf of Scott Bullock, Daytona JV, LLC, for the approval of a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, SSCPA, changing the future land use map designation for 6+ acres of land generally located east of the South Atlantic Avenue, north of Braddock Avenue, and south of International Speedway Boulevard, from tourist accommodation to high-intensity mixed use, amending Neighborhood Policy C and amending the redevelopment element to add uses to the high-intensity mixed use future land use category. Then I want to get down to the second case. If you can get down there, that'd be great, just so it's up there. Number 5 is rezoning to planned redevelopment, redevelopment PDRD Longboard DEV 2016-074 quasi-judicial hearing. This is a request by Robert A. Merrill III, Esquire, Cobb Cole, on behalf of Scott Bullock, Daytona JV LLC, to rezone 6+ or minus acres of land generally located east of South Atlantic Avenue, north of Braddock Avenue, and south of International Speedway Boulevard from tourist accommodations T1 to plan development redevelopment PDRD to allow for a mixed-use development and the opportunity for hotel, multifamily, restaurant, office, and retail uses. Okay. If I could then just go ahead with the report. Like I said, we are going to be reviewing these together, and so we'll start with the comprehensive plan amendment, and I'll just take a second here to get a little water. All right. You can see that the location, if you would come back, please, to that site is the area just to the south of ISB, directly north of the Beach Safety Patrol headquarters. So that is the general location of one of the largest sites we have along the beach. The other one that I think everyone recognizes is the Hard Rock, which is just to the south of the Beach Patrol headquarters. The next map, please, just shows you what is intended here for the future land use amendment that you're reviewing, and that is going from the current land use of the tourist accommodation, and you see the red boundary, I hope, on there, to the high-intensity mixed use, and you can see the crosshatch with the red. And what I want to point out here is there is one change that has to be made. This is a graphical error on this map. That area on the east side to the right for that boundary should extend all the way to the high mean, the water level, which is the location of the property. So this only includes that area that is at the seawall. So what we're asking is that everyone recognize that that's one change that we'll be making between here and the time we get to City Commission. Just an error. Next slide, please. That is for a text amendment in the comprehensive plan, and we have in the redevelopment section of that comprehensive plan a high-intensity mixed use, and that has a that has within it a number of uses that are provided and described, and we're being asked by the applicant to add the following: multifamily residential, restaurant, and office uses as limited by Neighborhood C policy. So that would be inserted in the comprehensive plan. The second text amendment section would be that neighborhood policy further into the plan, and that would be the I'll just read it because I'm not sure everyone can see that. It will be described as J issue for the 6-acre property immediately north of Sunsplash Park, as described in Exhibit A, which is a legal description, which is included in the high-intensity mixed-use future land use category contained in the redevelopment element of the comprehensive plan. FAR should be limited to less than 10. FAR is floor area ratio. Then there is Policy 1, which states, for the 6-acre project property immediately north of Sunsplash Park, retail, commercial, restaurant, multifamily, residential, and office uses shall be permitted and shall be limited to 4.5 FAR, with retail uses limited to 250,000 square feet, office uses limited to 500,000 square feet, and hotel uses limited to 1,300 rooms. So very specific request in a very specific area of the South Atlantic redevelopment area. So if we could go on to the last slide for this particular case, we have a recommendation where staff is stating that we are comfortable with what has been provided, that we find that the small-scale amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It does not represent urban sprawl, and the city has available capacity to serve the increased demand on available water and sewer. Based on that staff analysis and review, with regards to the future land use map amendment from tourist accommodations to high-intensity mixed use, it appears to meet the criteria of the proposed amendment. And the proposed redevelopment element, the neighborhood C text amendment, the information provided by the applicant, staff finds that the requested small-scale amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Majority vote of the board members present and voting are required to recommend approval or approval with conditions or denial. So that comes later. We're going to go on now and describe the other request, which is for the rezoning. And this is to a planned development from the T1 tourist accommodation district. So what I want to point out here is that a PD in this case is something that's written into the code. It's very flexible in terms of looking at how to meet specific needs of a particular project that somebody brings forward, and the zoning that's in existence doesn't work, but it's something that can be consistent with our comprehensive plan. We can look at rezoning, and what it's going to do is it's going to change the setbacks, it's going to possibly change density. That kind of thing is what we're talking about this afternoon. We are looking at something here that is different than what staff normally sees when we see a PD. I want to get that out right up front. This is not what you normally will see with a PD, but it meets the plan development provisions in our land development code. And so we want to just jump into the next slide here and show you that site. That's the zoning T1. And if we go on to the next slide, this is what's been presented by the applicant as just a conceptual. Very early on, we saw something that was going to be more of your bubble diagrams, your ideas, but it's a concept. And if you look at any zoning district or anybody trying to rezone anything from one zoning district to another, it's always about changing what is a concept with you've got side yards and places you can put buildings and places you can't. And that's what's being considered here, is where are buildings going to go, where are the open spaces going to be, and that's what we're trying to address here tonight, is that the applicant is showing something that's not going to be the buildings that you're going to see in the future. It's not going to be the facades, and it doesn't have to be. But it's just a different way that you can create the base for what you're going to do in the future. And then you can come back and you can put together a site plan. Next slide, please. I'll let the applicant talk about some of these details, so I'm not going to spend time on it now. We were provided with something that was just a more clear proposal that will be in the plan development agreement, which is looking at the different areas on the property and where those buildings and those view corridors would be located, where maybe a high-rise is located. And so there's some flexibility in moving things around, but I'm going to let the applicant talk about this. Next slide, please. Again, another view of maybe where some buildings would be located on the property. On your left, you've got the upper level. On your ground level, you have some of the graphics showing you the what the buildings might be, with residential on the left side of your screen, possibly a hotel on the right. I say possibly because, again, we're dealing with concept right now. And next, please. The agreement will also have a provision in it about some of the uses. What I'm showing you is not the uses that are already permitted in the T1 district that are already allowed now, but showing you some of the uses that are being added as a part of this plan development. And I have one at the top that the applicant has advised me they are going to remove, which is bar and lounge. The others, boutique bar, brew pub, restaurant with drive-in service, restaurant with drive-through service, cigar lounge, personal service establishment, professional service offices, retail sales, and service uses, the applicant would like to provide those as well for the overall development, to have the opportunity to place it in as a part of a building or standalone. That is what we understand today. The plan development highlights, I've given you some specifications on the next page, please. And this is a building that will have some height. Clearly, if there are going to be buildings on there, they could go up to 384 feet maximum. I somehow think that the planes will dominate where that limit will be. But again, that can be requested, the change in the height. The maximum number of rooms is 1,300. Maximum density on the site of 150 units per acre. Maximum retail uses of 250,000 square feet, and a maximum office uses of 500,000 square feet. This doesn't mean it's all getting packed in there at once, but what it does mean is that if office uses are there and they go in that direction, that they want to have an understanding they can move in that direction with enough area for what they possibly might do on that property in lieu of something else happening. So the one that's going to catch everyone's eye, I'm sure, is the 150 units per acre, because right now the current zoning is 40 units per acre. So this is a significant change in the plan development, but it's something they feel that would work on the site. And the parking specifications and the lot specifications are in your report, and then there's some side yard and rear yard setback provisions I'll let the applicant speak to. And I would tell you that from our viewpoint, we're looking at where the boxes and the zoning and everything is, and I think what's being asked this evening is something that fits within the context of our plan development in the Land Development Code. And I'd like the applicant to speak to some of the details that they think would be important for all of you to hear. And the staff is going to certainly support the board's recommendation this afternoon, and just let you know that the item is going to be tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Commission for first reading on October the 19th of 2016, and it would be up for a second reading on November the 2nd, 2016, if this were to stay on its current schedule. And that's the conclusion of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Can we hear from a presentation from the applicant, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, for the record, Rob Merrill with Cobb Coal, 149 South Ridgewood. I want to first thank you all for being here for a special meeting for us, and it helped us greatly in terms of our timing and process here today. I want to introduce a few folks that are here with me, just so you know that everybody in the room isn't here not being with me. Scott Bullock is here with Consolidated Tomoka Land Company. Robert Sponseller is here with me up front. He's going to do a little talking after I get done. John Hensley is also with Robert and an architect on the case with us. Sands Lassiter is our transportation consultant. Steve Burns, our landscape consultant from Zeb Cohen Associates. Mark Corrett, also a planner from Zeb Cohen, and Debbie LaCroix is here with me from Cobb Coal. Those folks are here to answer any questions that you guys have in their particular area of expertise. Thank you, Reed. You've given us a very thorough, I think, presentation from the staff perspective. I would elaborate on that by saying you've got also, I think, a large packet on each of these projects that you can rely on and ask questions about. Essentially, as Reed said, we're here with two requests. We're putting them together because they're all part and parcel of the same thing that we're asking for tonight. One is a comprehensive plan amendment, the other one's a PD rezoning. As Reed explained, what we're changing here, in both of those forms, is from a tourist commercial designation and zoning to a mixed-use project that allows different uses and in different forms. A big reason for that is part of the history of what's happened here is when the redevelopment, when the community redevelopment area was formed in the 90s, there was a future land use and zoning placed on the oceanfront properties to the north of International Speedway Boulevard. To the south, which this property is in, it remained in the same future land use and zoning categories as it was before the CRA was formed. So the future land use that I'm asking you for tonight is a redevelopment area-based future land use. Seems to make sense to me. So that was the first thing that came to mind for me, was that's where we should probably be on all of this frontage to start with. So what it does essentially is it opens things up in terms of the types of uses. Reed mentioned a couple of them. Multifamily residential. Yes, in a density that we talked about. We want people living on this beach. Okay. The restaurant use is currently not allowed as a standalone use. I'm not sure why, but somehow the redevelopment piece of this stayed to the north, and now I'm asking for it to be brought to the south, at least as it relates to this piece of property. I mentioned that Scott Bullock was here from Consolidated Tomoka, and the reason why I think that's important to y'all, a couple of reasons. When I stand in front of y'all with a request like this, I like you to know who you're talking to, not just me. Consolidated Tomoka Land Company is a publicly held company that's local. They've been here for 100 years. I think everybody knows who they are. They have a half interest in this site, and this is the first time they've come across the bridge with anything that I'm aware of. So to me, this is a big thing. We've got somebody who's invested in this community, is doing things like the Tanger Outlet Mall, the Trader Joe's Distribution Center, the Minto Communities, which will be by far the biggest residential project that's ever happened in Daytona. Those things are either coming out of the ground or they're very close to it right now, among other things. Lots of other things. Tomoka Town Center, which surrounds the area where Tanger is, that's in process, and I think you all will hear about that very soon as well. Those things are happening from Consolidated Tomoka Land Company. They decided they wanted to try the beach. Now, I think you definitely know, this board definitely knows, it's a little different flavor of things when you get across the river. So to them, this is kind of a new experience. I've been doing a lot of it, so I think I hopefully know how to navigate through this. But it's new to them, and yet they're experienced, and they are out there marketing Daytona Beach in our vicinity worldwide with things that I've already talked about on the other side of the river. I'm hoping it ends up here, and I think that's a big part of what I hope you're considering. The change from the tourist commercial use and expanding it to the mixed use land use in the PD zoning, as Reed was saying, is a little different than the type of PDs that you guys have seen that have a plan, that somebody has a set of building plans that they're going to build. Two things have happened, and you'll hear from some of the people, and I already hear some of the mumbling in the background. you'll hear from some of the folks in the audience that will say, well, we want a plan. That's what we're supposed to have when that happens. You heard your professional staff say that's not the case, and they'll reaffirm that if necessary. But the way that we've changed this code less than a year ago is different than the way it's been for the last 25 years. The good news is the way we changed it, we spent 4 or 5 years. When I say we, it's almost everybody in this room has had some hand in how it happened, was based on things everybody else in the world has been doing for a long time different than us. So the idea that someone's got to have a building plan to come in and get their zoning customized for their site is a thing of the past in Daytona. It's been a thing of the past for a long time in other places. So the code changed. So we're here and we're able to be here, as Reed said, with a much more generalized approach to zoning, but still plan development. So some of you might have heard of form-based codes. So some of what they've been doing in the last 20 years in a planning world is different than what you just write with the text in the zoning ordinance. It has form associated with it. You see different ways that things can be placed and structures can take shape. We did that with a lot of the new land development code. We didn't do that on the beach. Now, I don't know why. I mean, I think what happened was, as we were going through that, and it took 4 or 5 years, and I was in it. I was in hundreds of hours of my life doing it, and lots of other people in this room were as well. We just couldn't get it all in there. So what you're seeing tonight is much more of a coming forward with a form-based code in the form of a PD than it is a plan-based proposal. If I'm explaining myself, I hope I can answer questions if I'm raising them, because I think it's an important difference that we're bringing forward here tonight. So with that, some of that form-based code, some of those set of rules, if you will, that we intend to live by going forward, also are going to bring forward a lot of design concepts that we intend to memorialize as part of this PD and live by, so that part of the rules involve these guys doing some things they didn't have to. Right? You're going to hear about those, and I think you're going to find them to be really positive. At the same time, they're going to be asking for buildings that someone might think are taller than their taste. At the same time, when you balance how tall the building is, there are other, I think, real distinct positive aspects that balance with that you're going to hear about. And Robert Sponsler, one of our architects, is going to go through, I think, a real visual presentation for you to talk about how we got here. And then I'd like to get up and maybe say a few things after he gets done, and then we can all answer your questions when we get to that point. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. I think I'm going to begin by talking about your town.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
State your name and your...
Sure. Robert Sponseller. I'm with John Hensley Architects. I'm going to begin by talking about Daytona. I think it's been described, the proposal we're going to show you tonight is somewhere between a master plan and a form-based envelope for the site development. We've been working with Tomoka for the last 8 months. I've known John Albright for many, many years. And this process, I think they should be applauded for the process they're taking. Instead of coming in with one plan all at one time, we're taking sort of a two-step process, which is more of what we see certainly in the Washington, D.C. area, and you see this in other major urban jurisdictions, which allows input early on basic planning principles in the process. You'll see this again when it comes back with final architecture, but what we're proposing to you today is a master plan concept and sort of physical, formal description of the project for planning purposes. So I'm going to begin, I'm going to get into the aspects of this plan that are specific and tailored to the site. I'm going to begin with some observations about Daytona that we made over the months that we spent studying the site and the city and our observations. The first slide puts the site into its context. You can see that it is located about a 2 urban block, 3-minute walk from the International Speedway and South Atlantic Avenue intersection. It's the yellow box just to the south of the circle. It is a site that is, obviously this is Main and Main in Daytona, and so this is a very significant site for the city. And it is appropriate that whatever is planned here be planned appropriately and fit in with the context, the neighborhood and the context. The way I see Daytona, from being somebody from the outside working here for the last over the last year or so, is that there's really multiple different scales to the Daytona environment. On the one hand, we have the intercoastal side and the old city center, and on the other side, we have the beach scale. So it's really a location with different scales. To the immediate west of South Atlantic Avenue is a commercial-faced residential neighborhood on the west side of South Atlantic Avenue. And we also, we looked at these different scales, these different textures. They all informed our thinking about how to arrange the buildings on the site. We also spent a lot of time by the convention center area to the north of this intersection. And we took away from that some issues that we thought could be improved in terms of the attention paid to the way the public realm is programmed. By that, what I mean is sidewalks of the proper width and depth so that they can be used by pedestrians and be hospitable and have amenities and be wonderful walking experiences in terms of both the scale of the buildings that face them and the way that those buildings are programmed. So there are examples of buildings near the convention center, for example, that have parking garages on the street, or they have sidewalks that are 8 feet wide, perhaps, too narrow. These are some examples of that. This is right south of the convention center connecting bridge. You can see a blank wall 40 feet tall, for example, along the sidewalk. And those trees don't know it, but they're not long for this world. So we wanted to do, good planning along the South Atlantic Boulevard, both in terms of the public spaces and in terms of the buildings, the way the buildings were arranged and ordered on the site. So our goal from this investigative kind of period, and again, I applaud Tomoka for taking this kind of two-step approach to the project, was to come away with planning principles that would serve this project and serve the neighborhood. So again, another shot of parking garages on the street, lack of trees. I don't think there's a tree for hundreds of feet in the vicinity of these hotels. These are things that you want to avoid when you're making pedestrian-friendly urban neighborhoods, and especially a site that borders a neighborhood and borders the scale of the beach. So the transition quality of the site was very important to us, and we took away these experiences from walking the site and walking the neighborhood and walking South Atlantic. They informed our plan. Bookending this slide, on the south side is the Hard Rock Cafe site, about a 33-story proposal that you saw recently. And then on the opposite end is the Convention Center hotel site redevelopment at 37 stories. So we're in the middle. We're closer to the major economic artery and facing Atlantic Avenue. These are some of the recent projects that I discussed, the bookended recent projects, the Convention Center Hotel and the Hard Rock Cafe on the left. I think you're very familiar with these projects. There were also things about these that we noticed. We thought it was very important that I mentioned the idea of a neighborhood development. So we think it's very important that a development of this scale, this is a 6-acre site, have varied scales, have different scales. It has, as I mentioned, it has the adjacency of the beach and the water and the large kind of grand prominent scale, but it also has the neighborhood scale along South Atlantic. Those are two different competing issues for a building. And so we've designed these forms in such a way that they respond to both of those scales. And some of these buildings were a little bit too monolithic, a little bit too even at the top of them, so we thought it was important to provide a little more variety. A couple of other things that interested us urbanistically were that, not sure the pointer, there we go. So there's our site. One of the things that was incredibly interesting to us was the relationship of the streets of Goodall and Vermont Avenues as they crossed South Atlantic Avenue. I think it's very important in a development like this along a major amenity such as a beachfront to have porosity in the planning of the buildings. So to provide the idea of taking these two neighborhood streets, extending them through the parcel as view corridors would ensure that there are views to the water, to the sky, to the light. We wanted to avoid a monolithic, evenly sized wall along South Atlantic Avenue. So you're starting to get a sense for the elements that formed our principles for this project. So Goodall and Vermont, extending those through to the site, connecting to the beach. The beach is what we're here for. It's a big part of this whole area. And so connecting very strongly to the beach was very important, both visually and through the building placements and also at the ground plane. And so we developed an idea about connecting very strongly through the site to the waterfront. Here's just a detail of that. You can see on the north side is Vermont Avenue. Each of these right-of-ways is about 30 feet in width, and on the south side is Goodall Avenue. So just the arbitrary nature of this parcel, the longboard parcel, adjacent to this geometry of these extended eastward right-of-ways, led us to an idea that we ought to just take the Goodall extension and put it into a larger idea about open space. And so we developed this notion of a 100-foot wide, almost acre-wide open space that would provide access, not only a visual corridor, but an actual ground-level access space, publicly accessible, all the way through to the beach on the site. So we started to form these guiding principles. And they're really fall into two categories. So the one category, it's about the open spaces at the ground plane. And we developed an idea about three distinct types of open space at the ground plane. And the second category is more physical, more three-dimensional. It's about the way the buildings fit within some of these other guiding principles I'm mentioning. And they consist of the right-of-ways extended through. They sort of slice the site already into multiple smaller parcels. And they relate to the idea of scale. So the idea that Atlantic Avenue would have one scale in the project, and taller buildings would be east of that. And so we have already a notion of dividing the site up into smaller parcels, allowing visual corridors through the site, placing buildings within these provisions, these design principles that we're establishing, and then treating the ground plane, arranging the ground plane spaces, the open spaces, around these three strong characteristics or themes that guide the design of the open space. And I'm going to talk about those first. So to begin with, and these are the ground plane commitments or planning principles that we're proposing. There are three distinct types of open space at the ground plane. The first is along Atlantic Avenue, we're providing an ample 35-foot deep setback zone. It can be used for outdoor cafes, for restaurants. I think Tomoka wants to do dining here in addition to other uses. It can be other types of gathering spaces in that 35 feet. I don't think this type of sidewalk exists yet on South Atlantic. So it's a very flexible outdoor space that can be used by restaurants, by other uses for amenitizing that street. It also goes a long way towards buffering the development to the neighborhood to the west. So it starts to address the scale and the intensity on the west side of Atlantic Avenue as well, which again is, if you think about that stretch of the urban plan, there's commercial kind of bookends that end the parcels on the west side of Atlantic Avenue, then the neighborhood starts beyond that. So you have neighborhood, commercial parcel, South Atlantic Avenue, then our 35-foot setback zone, and as I mentioned, retail commitment along this entire frontage, so well-planned uses that will support that open space. You don't want open space without any use there. So we're programming it with retail spaces of different types, and we're committing to a certain height threshold along Atlantic Avenue of 85 feet. So we're scaling the buildings down along there. So this is the first component of our open space plan. It's the streetscape along Atlantic Avenue. The second component, it relates to what I described earlier of this combination of Goodall extended and the inherent geometry that we own as part of the site. Left us with this potential for a approximately 1 acre but 100-foot wide open space that could be landscaped and amenitized, connecting the neighborhood to the beach. So there's a 15-foot existing walkway on the north side that's sort of a cement walkway. This is something completely different. It's going to be green, it's going to be planted, and it's 100 feet wide. It's approximately 1 acre in size for the entire site development. That's something that we're incredibly excited about. So talked about the retail front, talked about the 100 feet. And the last component of our open space has to do with the seawall side, where we're providing a 60-foot outdoor space, which, depending on the hotel and the residential components, could be amenities that serve those uses, but also allow a sympathetic placement of uses and structure along a potential future boardwalk if that were to occur. I know that is one of the ideas out there in the community. So those three components form what I call the open space plan, components of our form-based plan at the ground level. And now I'm going to talk about the three-dimensional aspect that complements those three open spaces. If there's any questions about those, I can take them, or I can just keep going. I'll keep going. So getting to actually I'm going to show you just a little more detail on each of one of those. So this is an example of the street section along South Atlantic Avenue. You can see the 35 feet. That really is a wonderful depth for shaded outdoor spaces, plenty of space for a 10 or 12-foot wide tree pits along that envelope. and then buildings that step down in height to provide that really intimate scale. There are sections of South Atlantic Avenue now, just north of here, that have really good bones. The grids of the streets are really wonderful, and the scale is really wonderful. This is meant to tie in with that concept of a low-scale street, 35-foot open space along that environment. These are just some examples of the way that space could be treated. We'd come back with detail. So this is an idea of a landscape sitting area. You could also have outdoor cafes along this space with plenty of room. It's actually wider than these sides. These are probably about a 20-foot wide sidewalk, and we're talking about 35 feet. Okay, the next aspect is the 100-foot wide, we call it the beach access area, approximately an acre in size. This sits on potentially on the south side of the site, adjacent to, I think, a municipal facility that's just to our south. And it could be landscaped to provide really a totally different experience to getting to the beach from what occurs today. Instead of a minimal 15-foot wide walking path, this could really be articulated with seating areas, canopies, shade trees, et cetera, to provide a really wonderful outdoor space for the neighborhood. So this is a space that's continuous from our property line to the face of the building on the south side of the site. And finally is the amenity zone on the beach side. I mean, that's what makes these sites interesting, is they have a sort of an urban city side, and then they have a much different scale on the beach side. So you want to respond to those two conditions. You want to plan your buildings to take advantage of those two conditions that you have. That's what makes this interesting urbanistically and an interesting place to live and work, I would assume. And so you want to take advantage of that. And so an example of that would be putting some of the amenity spaces out in that 60-foot zone along potentially, at least along the beach, but potentially along a boardwalk if that were to occur. And planning that space in such a way that the residents and the hotel guests or whoever may inhabit the building could take advantage of that prospect as well. That's the beauty of Daytona. Here's some examples of those kinds of outdoor amenity spaces. This one, I think, is more pool-oriented, more residential. This is perhaps hotel here on this slide. So that's the first section of the plan. Is the first category of the form-based design that we've come up with. It's about the ground plane. It's about the types of open spaces on the ground plane, and it's about providing a building that fits in through those public spaces, open spaces, to the neighborhood, that is sympathetic to the neighborhood. So now I'm going to go to the three-dimensional physical form of the building that could work within those parameters and the parameters of the very important parameters of those two streets that inform our plan. So I mentioned to you how important we thought it was to have these street view corridors continue. I mean, many times when you drive north of here, you'll go along a wall that's very tall and very long and blocks you from the street frontage, which is really not something we wanted to do. So by slicing the site into thirds, we've talked about the southern third being an open space for public access. That's a neighborhood public access zone. The middle side would have one or two buildings in it, one low scale, one slightly taller scale. And the top third could have a third building in it. So what you get when you overlay these restrictions, these commitments onto the site, is you get a site with scale. Multiple buildings, different building heights, textures that are going to fit in with a smaller scale to the west and still be able to address the scale of the Atlantic Avenues, the Atlantic Ocean side of the project. So these illustrate two different ways that buildings could be inserted within this series of guiding principles, design principles that we're committing to and comply. In all cases, there's a small street scale. In all cases, there's the open spaces that we discussed. And in all cases, the buildings will have different heights, different sizes, different scales, and manage the size of this site, which is 6 acres and quite substantial, in such a way that it'll be sympathetic with the neighborhood and address the scale of the ocean. This plan, I think Reed did a great job talking about this plan. What it illustrates is, again, the superposition of all those commitments, all those planning ideas. The sidewalk zone, the 100-foot zone, the right-of-ways extended, the amenity zone, and then the way that buildings come after these important design principles. You establish the contextual urban principles that are right for the site, and then you put the buildings in. You don't do it the other way around. You start with this process, you start with this form-based code, and that's why I think Tomoka should get a lot of credit for taking the time and indulging us in this exercise to figure out what's an appropriate response for this location on this important site near International Speedway Boulevard. And then you come in with the color and the detail and the skin and everything else that follows. Again, this is the way we see this being done in Washington, D.C. and in other jurisdictions currently. It allows input early on. It allows more security as you go through the process with potential investors and development partners. And I personally think it's the right way to go about planning. I mentioned, again, some of the things we noticed by the convention center site and how we thought they were challenging from a pedestrian's point of view. And these had to do with the way that, once you establish that you're going to put the uses and the buildings on the site, how do you organize those buildings to be pedestrian friendly, to be good for residents in the larger community? And so this is our approach to let's say, the deli sandwich that is mixed use. So what we begin by doing is internalizing all of the loading and servicing facilities that the building needs. Mixed-use projects have a lot of service needs, but you need to plan those in such a way that they don't negatively impact the environment. We were walking up by the hotel, and there was a big, large open loading dock for maybe 80 feet along one of the street frontages. So we're internalizing that in our plan and putting all the servicing for the multiple buildings on the interior, not open to the exterior. The parking will be below grade, or it'll be internal to the buildings that are above grade. So we would be lining the parking with residential or hotel rooms on the sides so that you wouldn't see those from the public realm, from the street, from the open space that we described. And then, very importantly, I'm showing the sidewalk, the amenity on the east side, on the Atlantic side, the multiple heights that we're proposing, and then again, even up in the building, on top of the roof of the building, we'll put courtyards and things that are just for the residents. So it's important to have different types of open space. We will have a publicly accessed 100-foot wide, almost 15% of our site area on the south side of the site, but we also need private interior spaces up inside the building. It's also one of the benefits of being on a site like this. But we're handling the neighborhood here. We're handling the public on the ground plane, and we're also giving the residents and the hotel users some private amenity spaces on the upper levels on the interior. We think that's appropriate. All of this is put into an urban package, an urban design, as a building that we think is sympathetic to anybody looking at it from the outside. So try to avoid those negative impacting elements such as service on the plans. So this is a series of floor plans. I'm not going to go too far into these, but they illustrate this concept on the different levels of the building. Again, this kind of mixed-use planning, multiple buildings on a site planning is something we do quite a lot, and so we've learned how to put these things together to provide a good urban building, a sympathetic building. You're looking on the left at a typical floor plan in the lower 7 to 8 floor height where all three buildings happen. As you go up, they drop off because the buildings drop off as you go up vertically. On the right is a ground floor plan. You can see how there is internal parking and loading, but it's all wrapped and screened with other uses. You can see the 100-foot open space on the right side. Then this is a detail of the ground floor plan, going up again, and then an illustration of the three distinct buildings with ground plane, beachside, a smaller wing on South Atlantic Avenue, and the interior courtyard between the buildings that I discussed. Again, the formal response that could work, both versions of the plan that could work within that, the design principles of the corridors extended and the open spaces. And then a high roof plan. We're seeing more and more green roofs on our buildings. Every horizontal plane on a site is important. And because we've dedicated so much of our ground plane to open public spaces, we also need to provide private space. So residents or hotel guests could have their own courtyards up in the sky, if you will, on top of the parking areas. And then the high roofs as well would have some type of a stormwater capture purification system on them, potentially with a lower wing on the Atlantic Avenue side. Here's a detail of a just a massing concept for that low-scale element that's along the Atlantic Avenue side. Here's the 35-foot zone I talked about. You get a sense of the porosity of the buildings. Again, by extending those view corridors through the site and arranging the taller wings of the building parallel to those view corridors, you have a very porous urban situation along South Atlantic Avenue that we think is highly important. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about height and the flexibility that height can allow on a site. If you limit the height on a project, but you keep the FAR and the density the same, you end up with a wall. You end up with a squat, monolithic, single-height building. If you allow the different heights to occur, you can essentially hide the density from the public realm and step the building heights and create more porosity through the square. So this is a trade-off that's often hard for people to understand, but it's very significant in terms of development principles. So we've arranged our buildings at 3 distinct heights with that benefit. And that's the conclusion of our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. We also passed around, I think, some exhibits. And I'm pointing to these diagrams. If you want to go through, I can go through these or wait for questions on these. What do you think? Go through this? Okay. Okay, so what we're doing here now is just getting a little bit of the weeds on the setbacks and the open spaces that we're proposing. So on the first sheet, Z1, what we're showing is the three building concept, working with the series of sorry. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, should I start over? This Z1 page really gets in and delineates versus current zoning what kind of flexibility we need on the setbacks. So the pink areas, for each, we have 3 distinct buildings and we have 3 distinct heights. Each building will have some minor waiver required, 20 feet on one side, 30 feet on another, 80 feet on another, in terms of strict compliance with the code. But what we're proposing is that we provide an equivalent open space for those pink area, let's call them waivers, elsewhere on the site. So we think that principle allows the open space to be responsive to the heights that we wind up with eventually. We've taken this height from the max height on the south building, an intermediate height on the north building, and the 80-foot height that we're committing to on the South Atlantic Avenue building. So on the next page, you can see the colors are a little bit off, but you can see that we're showing how that would be translated on the site. The pink areas for the buildings are areas that would require a waiver. And now I've been up and down the corridor and I've looked at the recent proposals, and I don't know of any other recent plans that have proposed 100-foot side yards that we're proposing. So we're already, with these side yard commitments that we're making, 40 feet and 100 feet, and the front and rear setbacks, we're below 35% of a lot occupancy on the site, which is a very low number for an urban plan. So what we're showing here is that the striped areas are where that pink area gets provided elsewhere on the site. Okay? So we're taking those setbacks, we're putting them in other places, we're asking for flexibility. Part of the reason we need that is that in order to extend some of these view corridors through the site, we have to move buildings just off of them. And I think the adjacent extension of those right-of-ways is the key element to this plan. I think that's what will make this building feel comfortable, this plan feel comfortable on the site, be sympathetic to the neighborhood to the west. So because we're providing some of those view corridors, particularly the Vermont Avenue view corridor, we need to get 20 feet relief placed somewhere else on the site because of that importance of that view corridor extension. So I think that's a fair trade-off. We've illustrated this for a couple of different concepts just to show you how the flexibility would work. I can go through those in detail if you'd like on the Z2A, B, and C sheets. That's illustrated. The section illustrates literally in terms of zoning code how those are calculated. If you look at Z3, it shows zoning code requirements for setbacks that determine the pink areas, if you will. And then the final sheet speaks to our architectural skin response. There are some standards, design standards in the zoning code that need to be complied with, things such as, unrelenting continuous walls of buildings without any relief or any setbacks. Quality of materials issues are raised in the zoning code. We would meet and exceed all of those, I think, in our design of the building. So we don't see those as an issue. So with that, that's kind of a quick run through, and I can come back to any of these diagrams. I think the takeaway for us is we've come up with a plan, studying this neighborhood, studying this city. We've come up with a plan that we think is an appropriate form with an appropriate ground level open space commitment, three-dimensional physical structure commitments based on neighborhood relationship. We've come up with this form that we think would work for this site. It is a form that Tomoka can then, if approved, a form that Tomoka can then go out and find the right development partner for, the right project for. But we know as architects that it works. We know it would be a very successful and efficient building design. We think it's very good with its relationship to the streets and the public realm. But this form, again, has two characteristics: a physical and an open space, a three-dimensional and an open space form. And that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to let you have your seat since we only have one. And just say a couple things to close to let the folks that came in the audience speak tonight, as I know we have limited time. Thank you for letting Robert take that time. He's obviously spent a lot of time working on this. He's come a long way to be here to do this tonight, and he's done this literally around the world. So I'm hoping that you guys can benefit from some of the concepts that he's bringing you based on the time that he's spent here. I want to highlight a few of them just so you kind of get the short version of what we're doing here. A couple of big things come out of this. Robert talked about sort of the pedestrian scale that he's implementing with his design concepts that we're being required to do based on voluntarily to keep from having what happened over on the north side where people called it the condo canyon, right? So there's very sheer walls, very close to the sidewalk that you feel like you're excluded from what's going on with the buildings, right? Just the opposite here. We're trying to create a completely different environment in that respect as it relates to what you see on the beach. I don't know about you, but when I get on the beach, I have a hard time looking to seeing what the ocean looks like. That's the opposite of what we're going to be doing here. So scale, differences in scale he's talking about. And this is not the architect speaking. I know some of you are expert at this and I'm not. But the idea of having different sized buildings on the same site, I think creates a sense of interest for the people that are not in the building. The biggest thing that we're bringing you here today from a standpoint of his design concepts, and it's unprecedented, unless you're the city of Ormond Beach or Volusia County and you're buying up land to make parks, because he's talking about setbacks when he's showing you that last set of slides. But when you're talking about setbacks, side yard setback 100 foot wide is different than a 100 foot wide park. That's green space accessing the beach. It doesn't exist unless the public's buying that. It just doesn't happen. So it's not the same. This 100-foot park or the additional view sheds that he's talking about for Vermont and Goodall Avenues to benefit the views and the access for those people that live on that street is unprecedented in the Beachside in Volusia County that I know of. So that's a huge one. I wanted to also mention to you before I sat down and open it up for any questions that you have for us before the public. This concept, part of the zoning concept that we're bringing forward is a phased plan. So I want you to understand that there's a very good chance that there might be a restaurant or two built on this site so something gets built. Unlike some other projects that had a lot of grandiose designs that started off with nothing but the whole thing. This can come in pieces. Okay, so, and there are people right now, Mr. Bullock and his folks and his company are already talking to about doing those things. So God bless them if they actually get the leases signed. But if we get some quality restaurants, which don't really exist much, Ocean Deck, there's a couple others here and there on the beach, but not many in Volusia County, I think that's a real score for all of us. So I just wanted you to know that's part of the concept of what we're bringing. Right now, just so you know, if you don't say that you approve this tonight, we can't build a restaurant on that piece of property. It's a fact. So with that, I think I'm going to sit down and before you have any questions for any of us, because we've got several of us here that can answer hopefully any questions that you have at this point.
I've got more of a clarification.
Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep.
I was just asking, you said that, which one was it, not Vermont, but
Goodall and Vermont are the two streets.
Is Vermont also going to go through like an access to the
Yeah,
beach? Or is it
so
gonna-
one or the other, and we're erring towards the south side because for different reasons. But there will be one or the other will have at least a view through the buildings, and the other will have a view on the ground, and access as well, public access, which is again completely voluntary. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant to say, and also if you look at the far north side, there's a little sidewalk there now with a fence. That's going to be expanded, and we're going to make that another public access.
Okay, that's what I was. Yeah, sure.
How much space will the public be allowed to walk around on the 6 acres? I mean, can they walk all around the hotels and all around the office buildings?
The area on that we're showing on the south side that could be on either side, it could be on the north side as well, would be where the public access would be.
And importantly, the Atlantic Avenue,
Right.
35 foot.
Of course. So the pedestrian activity would be on the street, along the street where the
35
restaurants.
feet deep on the street,
Correct.
That whole
100 feet wide, 100 feet wide on the south side, all the way
One
from
or the other.
Atlantic to the beach.
One or the
Each
other.
of those is almost an acre of open space that the public will have access to. So
Okay.
if you add all that together, and our landscape architect is here, it's close between 1.5 acres and 2 acres of space between the 100-foot access point and the 35-foot zone along the street. It's a lot of public access to open space on this.
So let's say that I lived across the street, or say I want to walk onto the property,
Yeah.
and I understand that the 100 feet and the 35 feet, that's all public access. And let's just say I wanted to walk up to the hotel and go in the lobby. Is that all open to just all the public and everything?
Yeah.
Or and I'm assuming if there's restaurants on that front part that's Atlantic,
the answer is
that
absolutely
they would
yes.
all be open to the public.
Absolutely.
So pretty much,
That's actually the goal.
I could walk all around these 6
Yeah,
acres,
because on the north side you can walk around.
right?
There may, if a part of it is a condominium, there may be limited access to that aspect of it. But hotel, no, of course it's open. Right? The restaurant as well. I mean, this is not a private restaurant or a private hotel. It's public.
I like the way this feels very much for the public. So my next question is this. What I don't quite understand are these views coming from the two streets. So can you just expand a little bit? How wide is the view? Like if
Well,
I'm
we
standing
thought
on
it
the
made a
west
lot of
side of
sense.
A1A, what am I going to see? How
So
wide?
Here's the way these developed. We started by just thinking if I lived here, if I lived on the west side of Atlantic, I'd want to be able to look through. I wouldn't want to be blocked. That's the whole beauty
But
of
how
living
wide
here.
can I look
So we
through?
started with the right of ways of those streets. You come out of your house, you stand in your front yard, and you look east. So we based it on the view quarter that they would have between their houses. And then we noticed on the south side of the site, because of the specific arbitrary arrangement of our parallelogram lot area on the superposition of those two right-of-ways extended, with that leftover area, we just decided to give it all to open space. And so 100-foot wide open space is, I don't know, what's your nearest large street right-of-way you can compare that to? That's a very ample view quarter. It's not a view quarter. It's
Okay.
it's
Like
looking at
something
a
else.
speedway,
Yeah,
straight down
speedway.
the
Maybe that right-of-way is enormous. So if you add the two together, it's actually...
So in between the two, the mid-rise and the high-rise, in
we do
between
need to
the
get some
two,
buildings and some density on the site.
Yeah,
So
okay.
in between those two, we want to put some buildings.
you can get some space, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So between the two, basically, I would see the low,
low
building
scale.
in the front.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that hopefully that might be full of restaurants and chairs outside and
So
cafes and on the
Currently,
side.
because of the way we're servicing the building,
Uh-huh.
there's kind of a windfall on the retail side. So because of you need 20 feet to get trucks in to service the building. Because we've internalized all that, it actually penalizes the building a little bit, but it gives a great windfall to the retail because we now have that 20 foot of retail that we can on
Okay.
the ground level. That's a 2-story building essentially that will be dedicated to the retail along Atlantic Avenue.
When he
So-
says retail, it means restaurant.
Okay.
Restaurants or other retail uses could be. We don't
Shops
know.
and restaurants.
Shops and restaurants.
Another one of my questions is, you showed the boardwalk on the back, but you say it's by others. Would you would not be building that?
No, I mean, so we're hopeful that Mr. Deneen and the county council are going to do what they said they're going to do, and I'm very hopeful for it. And that is from University to Silver Beach, right? Now, it disheartens me because I really want it to happen. I think that taking the little piece of boardwalk we have left and making it a grand boardwalk like in Virginia Beach here in Daytona Beach that puts us over the top, guys. I mean, if it really happens, I agree that there's some doubt, but if it really happens, and there's a lot of people behind the scenes working and in front of the scenes to try to make that happen, it would be a real score for us.
So this by others, because that has to be a government-sponsored, the boardwalk. It would be a, okay, city or county.
The good news
That's
is
city or county?
It's county. We're
Okay.
planning for it, and we're going to cooperate. You know, we want to be part of it, but we're not the architects of that. We've got enough on our plate here, I think.
Okay.
Right, Robert?
I have another question. You show, and you talked about you were going to put green parks and green spaces on the tops of your buildings. Is that on the top of both of those buildings and the low building?
Once
All
we
three?
get to the next step in the development process, there will be users for the buildings. In our experience today, practicing in this environment of environmental design, there is going to be a need to put a filtering system, a qualitative filtering system on the roofs of the buildings. That's the next step. I think our civil, I don't know if our civil engineer is here, but on all the buildings that we do today, there are green filters on the tops of the buildings. I don't know if that's necessarily applicable here yet, if it's come to Daytona yet. So I can't say.
So my question
It's
is,
not a mandate.
It's not a mandate?
My question, I like it. My question is, will it be on all three buildings?
Well, no. So the honest answer to you is that's part of this. That's part of the concept. Some of the things that I was talking to you about are locked in that we plan to do. The entitlements that we're asking for go along with the things that we're promising to do. The green tops of the buildings, some of the concepts that we hope to do, and we want people that come along to do them, but they're not mandates. That's why I want to make that clear to you.
We'll see how the water quality issues sort out as we go forward.
It's being done elsewhere. Hasn't been done here yet. We hope to be the first.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a question. You mentioned the frontage. Is that all going to be retail except the condominium, whatever?
So right now, the way we planned it, the hotel entry would be in the 100-foot space. The retail, you'd probably have, my guess, in terms of typical tenant sizes, you'd have 5 or 6 separate entrances for retailers along the street. The residential entrance is set back from that, so it's really all retail at Atlantic Avenue.
So that's based on the whole.
It's based on the frontage of that wing of that building. That building is an 8-story building with retail for the first 2 stories.
Approximately the size of
250
that?
feet.
250
Yeah.
feet. And the rest?
The rest what?
The rest of the property?
Well, one's an open space
Gilbert,
to
if
the
you
right.
look at the concepts that he passed out,
Yeah.
you're going to see basically 3 pieces of this.
Yes.
They're going to be
Three
two
buildings.
varying height
Yes.
tower type buildings that can have a combination of condominium and hotel, and then the others are restaurant, retail, shops and such on the lower scale building that's closer to the road.
So you're talking about the smaller, small, okay.
That's like
And
a
again,
retail, like a
exactly.
little village building.
And
Yeah.
again, those are the things that we're committing to in terms of form.
Okay.
If somebody comes along and decides they want to put, for instance, a little boutique hotel right next to the restaurant on the front, we can do that. Right?
The only reason I said because you kept saying restaurant.
That's the idea.
You know,
I mean, so all of the mixture of those uses can go anywhere on the site.
Okay.
So it works anywhere, but the recipe that he's put out in most of these forms is probably the most likely.
It makes the most sense. With
Yeah.
that 35-foot zone for restaurants, they will salivate over that kind of an outdoor potential space for seating and dining and gathering. So that's a wonderful amenity for them. They usually don't get that. So my guess is it would work great for restaurants.
And like I said, in all honesty, there's a chance a restaurant comes in first and does it on their own first. Pretty good chance.
I agree.
And I'm hoping for it. So
I have another important question. How much space, square footage-wise or floor-wise, would this proposed office space be?
it's allowed to have a lot of office. We don't know what the market's going to bring. We've allowed it so that if the market shows up, it's available. So. I mean, truly, the office, exactly. So the office space can go in the tower features or in the lower scale feature, either one. Like I said, all those uses can move around wherever the market says they should be. None of them, I think, are in any way incompatible with other uses based on the scale of things.
So the offices could be in any of the three.
Could be in
any
of
the 3 buildings.
Could be in the penthouse.
The retail is probably most likely above the retail.
Right. That's the most likely. Yeah. But we've allowed it to be mixed up anyway. And if you guys see any problem with any of those mixtures, say so. But I think that everything works if the market comes, somebody wants to build it.
Well, I have a comment about that, but we wait for our comments, don't we?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. First of all, I like the fact that the ugly parking isn't showing. And I know you used some examples of the Hilton, and I happen to work for the Hilton. However, I do agree with you that looking at a wall straight up in the air is not very inviting. And I think the concept of putting or allowing restaurants to be separate is great. And the reason for that is you could always put a restaurant in a hotel, but the big secret is the Hilton has 7 of them in there, and you probably don't even know they exist. So that's not very welcoming to the public. And it's really hard to get people to understand that they're open to the public, but nobody knows it. And restaurants tend to run better when they're run by the individuals versus a hotel. And I'm not saying that to bash my hotel. I'm saying that because you ran restaurants for 25 years, and so I know how to run a restaurant. And I know it's better when you're kind of on your own there. What I'm looking at, one of the questions I have, it's not really a question, it's just an observation, is the higher we go on some of these buildings is because of the rules of how much easement you need or setback you need, it looks like one of the buildings to the north is more or less the reason why you're needing that additional 20 feet, I think is what it is because you are moving your building over so that the people down the street can have a good visual to look down the street. So when when you are asking us for approval of that, they're actually moving that building over so that you who live on that street can actually see the ocean. So I know that that's on one side. And then the other one, the taller you go, you're going to need more space is what's required. But yet, do you really need that space? Because you're actually giving that back to the public anyway on that one basically long acreage there. So it's like you're kind of giving it back even though you're asking.
I think so.
Basically, right?
I agree.
Excellent.
That's again, like Robert said, he designed from that space first,
right?
Before the buildings were placed. So the setbacks, relate to that space as well as what's coming from either side.
Right.
Without question.
And then also, originally the way it's planned or zoned right now would be, I would say, around 10 stories, and you're knocking that down in the front to be about 4 to 5 stories to kind of keep it all different levels, right?
Yeah,
it's essentially 7 stories, just 80
Okay.
feet with a tall retail. So it's a tall retail floor, and then 6 or 7 floors above. I think we're saying 85 feet. So it's an appropriate scale for that street.
Right. But again, if you did a single monolithic building with the T1 zoning that's there now, it could be higher, much higher than that.
Right.
2 to 3 times as high. So. Again, I think we're bringing something that at its peak is higher.
Right.
But when you mix it all together and put all those different components in that Robert explained that we're going to be bound by, it's a better product in the end for everybody, including the folks across the street.
Right. Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
What about the retail? What kind of restrictions are you going to place on retail? Because Beachside tends to have no restrictions at all on the type of retail, and it needs to be much better so that it's not a duplication of what we've had down Main Street, Boardwalk.
Excellent question.
We don't want any more of that. It has to be different. Can you restrict it?
Yeah, I can tell you that a lot of that's been talked about. We've been in this conversation with the city for a long time now, several months. And a lot of that question has come up, and along the way we've taken off a lot of the uses that we otherwise allowed. An example is the trouble they've been having on Seabreeze. So we all want Seabreeze to come back to life. And part of what's happening is there's a decay that's resulting from some of the uses that are over there that were in the big list of uses that we had on this property, just trying to keep things as open, as flexible as possible, one of which you saw come off the list today that Reed mentioned. So taking some of those things out of the mix, I think, limits it that way. So we take some of that opportunity for those things to happen out of the mix, I think, in respect to the neighborhood, in respect to the mix of things that are happening on the beachside that I think have been troubling in some respects.
What came out of the mix? I've missed that.
The bars.
Oh.
The nightclubs. The lounges.
I missed that.
Right. So a few of these boutique bars, they've got some very small scale boutique bar, cigar bars that the Clarion folks with the Land Development Code change put in with limitations that are going to be part of the hotels and part of the retail and part of the restaurants. It's not, Big Daddies that used to be down on Main Street, right? So this is a different thing. You remember? See, Joe Bear's old enough to know what that was. So that's the piece. Those are the pieces that are coming out that I think you probably you read about in the newspaper down there that are causing some problems.
And I think you can have I lived in a community before where you couldn't open a bar or a restaurant or a bar unless it had food and beverage. So basically, you're opening a restaurant, that happens to have a very nice, loungy, upscale type atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm not making a teetotaler statement here. I'm just saying that when it becomes an isolated use, that's where we've been getting problems on Seabreeze and some other places, ISB, et cetera.
I have some questions, but I think they're more for staff. Since this is sort of an open-ended plan, when they actually go to having a real plan set before us, will we be going back through this board for approval on those individual on the individual buildings? Also, the amendment to the comprehensive plan, could you elaborate a little bit more on that process that goes from the redevelopment board to the planning board to the commission, and then it further has to be approved on a state level or in a small scale?
On a small scale, Doug, the small scale
perfect
amendment,
segue.
you came in just the right time.
So the next step beyond the city commission.
Right, the small scale goes to the Department of Economic Opportunity, used to be DCA. Also goes to the Volusia County, or after its adoption, it goes to the VGMC and for review. And if we have any recommendations or objections or comments from the state, we'll address those.
For those of you who don't know, Doug Gutierrez is in our planning department, and he is the person who wrote the report on the comprehensive plan amendment.
And the last thing is, do you have any sort of projection on what sort of revenues might come from this for the city, and particularly for the redevelopment funding?
Yeah, we don't have enough information to give you that until we get to a site plan process.
What I can tell you as the applicant is nobody's here talking about any help with the increment. Okay, so this is all upside at this point, and we don't know what the upside is till somebody shows up and is ready to build a restaurant or build a hotel. We're getting them ready for that. When they come in, if the hotel is a $150 million hotel, you'll be able to calculate what the tax base is going to be, and it's a win for everybody. Obviously.
Well, redevelopment funds come from bed tax. Is that correct?
No, they come from in this case, it'd be the South Atlantic redevelopment area, that narrow strip on both sides of A1A, and on the south side of ISB. There's that area and that area only that you're dealing with to raise the funds, and we haven't had money in that area for a while because of the when we had the hurricanes and everything happened back when this thing was created in 2001. The values dropped below where we started, and we're just seeing the first dollars trickle in right now. So it's the money that comes out of that area, and the only way you really put money in that area is to have projects that are built in that area.
Right. So it would be a significant input to the redevelopment.
It would, and there is a provisions in the redevelopment plan. This site is identified in there as one of the sites that should be supported for the commercial. And this is also an area where if somebody did come back later and they wanted to request some financing, that could be something considered by the commission. There are some very specific policies of how you need to reach certain levels in that plan. So it really is not for everybody. But if somebody felt that they needed some assistance, they could approach the city, and the commission could, if they wanted to, financially support that project as well.
Can I mention one thing? I've taken a lot of your time, but this is a really important thing that you brought up that I want to just kind of put the couple of building blocks out there that everybody recognizes if they don't already know. This site doesn't have any buildings on it, of course.
Right.
So what happens with the redevelopment, the CRA, is the money that goes from the tax value at zero, where it is now, land value, to building things, all goes to the CRA. So all the money he's talking about doesn't go to the county and other places in the city hall. It goes to the CRA. And so whatever we build here goes into that almost empty bank that he's talking about.
Right. So I guess my point was that it would be a significant source for funding for the CRA and possible for other projects like neighborhood
And does it only
improvement
stay in the
and
Beachside
such.
CRA?
Well, it goes
in the South Atlantic area, south of Alaska.
But that money can be spent on things like, sidewalks and lighting and landscaping and beach access and you name it. I mean, it's pretty loose. So that increment can get spent.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. We'd like to hear now from the affected parties. I guess I'm going to... Thank you. As we'll start with Suzanne Bousquet, please.
Do you have a projection? We have a PowerPoint presentation.
Sure. Please do.
And this is my clicker? Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Bousquet. I live at 600 Lenox Avenue in Daytona Beach. And I'm speaking with you today representing the neighborhoods and the residents of the Beachside in Daytona Beach. Many of them are here with me today. And I am here to present our official neighborhood position after some meetings and discussions. Planned developments have benefits for the community, not just private gain for the owner. So let's talk about what immediate public benefits this planned development will yield. If we go through this process and it's approved, at the end of the day, they have a PD, but there are no actual jobs, no increased tax revenue, no aesthetic improvements. What are the opportunities that come with this planned development? When will they build something? When? Have you read the phases and the time frames here? We'll be waiting and wondering when something will be built. What will they build? Will it be a nightclub? I believe Mr. Merrill said that had come off the list, but I thought I heard that bar comes off the list. But maybe it'll be a school and a daycare center. How different are those two uses? Maybe it'll be a great big parking garage. Today, with this planned development proposal, we don't know what will be built. They don't know what will be built. You don't know what will be built. Will this mystery development be sustainable long term? And will it improve our lives in Daytona Beach? It is our understanding that in an ideal planned development process, you start with an empty lot and you go through all of the planned development processes, the back and forth, and you end up with a completed project that benefits the community. If they could bring us a good planned development with real benefits, a specific plan, and a known purpose, we could get behind that and support that.
Okay. All right, Paula, you got your 3 minutes?
No. Not the 3 minutes applies to the public comment. So, yeah.
Thank you. In contrast to the ideal PD process, we consider this to be the bad deal PD process.
because it starts with an empty lot. We'll go through all of this, and if you approve the PD agreement as proposed, what we'll end up with is an empty lot with paperwork. Very valuable paperwork indeed, because it will provide a catalog of waivers and exemptions that will benefit the owner when they sell it or bring in developers. So it's our position that this process benefits the landowner. Furthermore, a good plan development offers certainty. It attracts investment, and it benefits the neighborhood. In our view, this plan development brings uncertainty for the reasons we just discussed. And that uncertainty can adversely affect neighborhoods and other investors. And there likely are potential investors looking at Daytona Beach, and we think they don't like uncertainty. For a moment, let's talk about density. This plan development proposes huge increases in the floor area ratio, the FAR, and the maximum dwelling unit allowance beyond what is in the Land Development Code. This PD proposes a jump in the FAR from 3 to 4.5 and nearly quadruples the maximum dwelling units per acre from 40 to 150. That's pretty close to quadrupling it. And this plan development is a long-term commitment. In the year 2041, I will be 92 years old, and this plan development will still be in effect. And who knows, we could still be looking at an empty lot. And it's impossible to predict the impact that far out. So thank you for your time. In conclusion, and again on behalf of the residents and the neighborhoods in our Beachside, our official neighborhood position is to respectfully request that you reject this plan development. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And do I just leave this here?
Second on deck is Mr. Jim Cameron.
So are we moving into public comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jim Cameron, Senior Vice President, Government Relations, Daytona Regional Chamber. I'm also a resident at 335 Bucknell Drive. And Chamber wanted to go on record in support of this project. We like to see new investment made in the city of Daytona Beach, but and also on Beachside. But we're also excited that this is a local company, Consolidated Tomoka, that is making this investment. This is a company that has brought quality projects already, like the Trader Joe's Distribution Center, but also bringing the Tanger Outlet Mall and such. But so they have a reputation here to uphold, though. But also, we like the fact that it's going to bring new jobs here to the area, as for construction, as well as for hotel, hospitality management type jobs related to restaurants and such. It's going to expand the tax base. And this is going to be a significant taxpayer where the money, like it was pointed out, is going to go back into the South Atlantic Redevelopment District. But also chamber-wise, we like, though, that a facility like this, it's going to require a lot of products and such, though. And we'd like to see, like, say, these bought locally and such. I mean, TVs, appliances, kitchen, bathroom fixtures, carpeting, things along those lines that can come from our local suppliers here. So we're going to be pushing for that more so. But also, we like that this is going to bring synergy, because it's going to bring another top quality competitor to the hotel market, but with a company that has a local reputation to uphold. And it's going to draw, again, more customers into this area, though, which again means new jobs. But as for the floor area ratio, Chamber, we've always liked tall and skinny type buildings on A1A and such. I mean, where you can have a view of the ocean, like the Aliki, so to speak. And we like, though, the attention to landscaping. We like as much landscaping as possible on these type projects. And like that it was brought up here in this by you earlier, though, I mean, just as for the type products that maybe in the retail field that are going to be coming forth. I mean, yeah, we'd like to see some new type products over there on Beachside, you know, in these retail types. Some of the things that are not carried so far. But again, Chamber, we support the rezoning of this project, and for plan development, redevelopment, we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Next is Jenny Nazar, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jenny Nazak at 413 Harvey. I am speaking as an individual this evening, although I generally agree with the conclusion that my neighbors made in their slideshow. I want to compliment Tomoka and the parties on the view and access element, the trees and landscaping, variable height of the buildings, pedestrian sensitivity. All these things are really important. And if there was an actual developer with an actual concrete plan, I'd be all, this is great. I'd be like, this is great. But this is kind of theoretical, so it seems like doesn't seem reasonable to approve something like this unless somebody was actually standing up here with a plan. But I like the concepts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Sandy Murphy, please.
Good evening. My name's Sandy Murphy. I live at 136 Park Avenue in Daytona Beach, and I want to speak in opposition to this planned development. I think there might be a misconception that some people have that the residents are just anti-development, or we don't want to see things change in our street or our area, and I think that's very far from the truth. Many of us would like to see positive changes. Many of us are enthused about the idea of funds coming into the CRA that will allow us to do other things in the South Atlantic. But what I think is happening here this evening is that we're being presented with an apparently very specific plan of very attractive uses laid out in a very appealing way. This planned development agreement guarantees very little of that. What is before you is carte blanche. Now, I understand that the owner of the land is respected in this community and that they have done good work, but they have done that because they're fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They are making money. They make money by doing good work. They don't do it as a charitable investment, and I don't think that we owe them any special consideration because they are a good corporate citizen. I think that we owe them fair consideration, but I don't think we need to give them this blank check that does nothing more than increase the value of the land at this point in time. They have a lot of incentive to develop it, but things change. And the way that this planned development agreement is proposed, this can be such a wide variety of uses, and it could be done over such a wide time span that we have no idea of what's really going to be there. And I think that if they are serious about what they're showing, then let's at least pull back on the uses that are listed in this and specify only those that they're talking about. Let's have some concrete details that they're willing to commit to. The architect has consistently used the words commit and concept as if they're interchangeable. They do have a beautiful concept, but this PD commits them to almost none of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Anne Ruby.
Thank you. Hi, Ann Ruby, 137 Park Avenue. I want to ask two questions, Reed, to make sure I understand this. Consolidated Tomoka, which we're all saying are wonderful corporate citizens and the owner of the property, they could turn around once this PD is approved and sell it to anybody. Is that correct?
Yes, we're changing the zoning on the property. The zoning runs with the land, not the owner.
Okay, so in other words, Consolidated Tomoka, who is up here requesting it because we think they're so wonderful, could turn around and sell it to somebody from Beijing any day of the week. So that's something to keep in mind. They're not really committed. They're going to tell you they are, and they are, but from a business perspective, they could sell it tomorrow once this is approved. Another question. When does the South Atlantic CRA run out?
I believe in 2036.
2036. So this project, this PD, could go undeveloped until the CRA runs out. So you need to think about this. They are proposing something. I have to compliment you on your plans. I think the conceptual plans are wonderful. And if this were a solid proposal that Consolidated Tomoka was committed to doing, it would be one thing. But it's not. All they're asking is that you increase the value of their property by giving them carte blanche potential to develop this within the proposed envelope. Right now, this isn't, specific variances should not, variances to our land development code should not be given in this kind of a setting. It's just not appropriate. There isn't a plan, there isn't a project, it's not specific. And there's no reason to approve this.
Thank you. Next is Jerry Cole.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Cobble. I live at 521 Goodall. I've been there 12 years. And I appreciate what a lot of the residents have already said. It's true to the fact, and I was going to mention some of the same things. The CRA has been broken ever since I've been there, which has been 12 years. So there hasn't been any projects that have put any money into that CRA that we've all been passed or approved by this committee in the last, 8 or 9 years. So there's one reason that we can't even count the benefit of the CRA getting from this package, from this planned development. This planned development was just taken over by Tomoka Land Company. I don't know how long ago that property was acquired by them. But we went through this exercise, 7 or 8 years ago when the previous company owned this property? I'm not sure, Reed. When was that?
Before my time.
Pre-approved. But they went in there, and as far as the zoning is concerned, before they even had a tenant or before they even had a design of what they were going to do to that property, it was approved for them to vacate Goodall and Vermont and to put up a seawall. They were going to put a 30-foot beach access on the north end and a 70-foot beach access on the south end and build up a seawall. And then they were going to do all this development in there. Well, they came in and excavated it. They closed down the streets, tore down the houses, built the seawall, took out all the sand dunes, all the sea oats, put an 8-foot sidewalk on the north end, and on the south end they had a 70-foot parking lot. Well, the 70-foot parking lot was acquired by the Beach Patrol Station, which is no longer a beach access for the neighborhood. And all that sand and all that dirt that comes off of that property blows down in that neighborhood. It has for the last 7 or 8 years. It's unbelievable. They had a fence up there for about, I don't know, maybe close to a year, and it's deteriorated and fallen down. But the point is that they went in and it was pre-approved to do all this excavation before there was even anything contractual to be put on that property. And then what happened, as you can see, that company took that property and did that excavation, which increased the value of it by the new zoning that they had placed on it. They turn around and sell it to somebody else, and now that company is trying to get it rezoned, so who knows? Because is there any commitment for any landlords or tenants or construction to be done on that property? No. There's nothing. They're just speculating on what could come in and what may happen. There's so many vacant areas, I would say within a mile south of ISB along that side of the beach that are vacant. And I'm about ready to finish. And that has been pre-approved, and they've changed the topography, now.
Just to let you know, sir, you had your 3 minutes, and we have to leave it at that 3 minute, please.
Okay.
We have to leave
Let me say goodbye then.
Thank you, sir. Sorry
that
about
property hasn't been improved all down through there, so
thank you, sir.
Take your time on this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Next is Amy Pyle, please.
I'm ready.
I might only need 2 minutes. Mr. Merrill mentioned that.
State your name, please.
Amy Pyle, 136 South Grandview. The zoning. He mentioned something about the zoning on the Beachside kind of stopped at a certain point and it didn't continue on down. And he, he alluded to the fact that he wasn't sure why. I don't. Maybe you can clarify that, why the zoning wasn't, for this wasn't already in the LDC. And then if you're going to grant these special attributes to this piece of property, are you also going to grant that to all the other property owners adjacent? Because that's what, it would seem to be, if the city wants to change the zoning, they should change the zoning on behalf of the city, and no one property should have a benefit over the others. One question that came to mind, and I know Ann summed it up so well, but I just was thinking, is it possible, think about this, could it be 100% private condos? Could it? Ask yourself that question before you kind of get too excited about how pretty this looks, because it is beautiful, and I applaud you. You're an artist, and it's amazing, and I would love for them to bring a project that looked this gorgeous. I want to grab onto it, take it home, and hug it, But then the last item would be, do you think the city would consider an assignability clause so that this developer has an obligation to this PD and they cannot turn and sell it right off to someone else? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on deck is Mike Pastore. Pastore, sorry about that, sir.
My name is Mike Pastore. I live at 1508 Virginia Avenue, and I'm in a posture of learning about how government works, specifically about how decisions are made with the planning process. I've had a varied career. I worked for 38 years. Right out of high school, I was a contractor. I started with heating and air conditioning, and then I became a general contractor. I built single family homes in the 70s. I have a comment not about this particular project, but about what I call corporate welfare in general. All right, the problem with corporate welfare is that it picks winners and losers. And a government now is being put in the position of a joint venture partner, okay, because government has the ability, to improve parcels of land with all these giveaways. And I don't mean to attack Consolidated Tomoka specifically. I believe that they do an excellent job for their shareholders, and I would like to make a comment to Mr. Merrill. He's good at what he does, but things are changing with Daytona Beach, and especially the residents. We're not some rubes at a carnival anymore where you can dazzle us with a shiny object, okay, and we're going to, and we're just going to give you the store. We need to be very hard negotiators, okay? We saw close up what happened when Jim Morris came up here and said, "Oh, we got to have this, we got to have this, got to have this." Well, you can't have it. Went back to the developer and said, "Oh, I guess we can do without it, or we're going to lose the project." Well, you know what? Maybe you don't need the density. Maybe you don't need the height. Okay, it just boggles my mind and say, well, people have a misconception about height. No, we don't have a misconception about height. Okay, it's too tall. All right, so we need to make these people back up, sharpen their pencil, and come back to this body and say we are willing to compromise and be accommodating to the residents' concerns, and with no slam on.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, if you would like to hear the response from the applicant, please.
I'll be brief. I know you guys have limited time to get the planning board started. There were a few questions and comments that were raised that I think are worthy of me taking just a few minutes to try to respond. And I'll start with, again, for the record, Rob Merrill. One of the comments was about the time frame of things, and that's a really important question, because with these PDs, a lot of times, especially when we're at concept, we're talking about a form-based code type of proposal here rather than a project that I'm bringing to you. I'll say a couple things about that. One, the outside time frame is not what we're talking about. There's an initial, somebody's going to build either a restaurant or some sort of a shop or retail or some other component hotel of this within 5 years. Says it in the agreement. So the things that, when we talked about commitment versus something somebody's talking about in concept, there's a commitment. The time frame commitment is within 5 years. Okay, something's going to be coming out of the ground. You asked a good question about when does this come back? What else happens? Because we're not giving you plans. You need to see plans. You want to see the architecture. You want to know exactly where the buildings will be built. So do these folks, and I don't blame them. We're going to be back to you and the planning board. Show you the plans, and you get to approve them. So that's coming back. Several people made comments about solid plans versus concepts. First thing out of my mouth was, this is not a plan. We're not bringing you a plan. We're not required to bring a plan. We're coming with zoning concepts, many of which are memorialized in that PD agreement that say what we're going to do. And Robert and I, between the two of us, said several of those things that are going to be part of this, I hope will be things that you guys value and you support. So the idea of there's a carte blanche privilege being given here, there's not. It's like any PD. There's a balancing. We're asking for certain building heights or certain densities or things that you guys, some people say they don't like in general. Tall buildings, well, everybody's got their opinion about that. But in balanced with a more than acre green space public park, which nobody has done in this community, I think it's a good balance. It's my opinion. Now, you're getting one man's opinion, but I happen to be somebody who was raised a block from here. So this is my home turf. I work a block from here. My grandparents raised 5 kids a block from the streets that we were talking about, Vermont and Goodall. Nobody's up here hoodwinking anybody, Mike. That's not what's happening here. And he sees me up here all the time, so I think he's generalizing. I hope he's not personalizing this to me. And I don't mean to be personal either. But I will tell you that Consolidated Tomoka and their investors and their company and the person who's standing here being their representative are invested in this area. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have, because there were several, and I tried to sort of compartmentalize them into 4 or 5 things here. But I'm here to answer any questions with the rest of the folks that came out tonight for our team.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you just kind of enlighten me on this, because I really don't understand. Why is it that is it a matter of financial and the economics of it? Why did you not go ahead and do a full set of plans?
We don't have any plans for development yet. I mean, so what we're doing is we're doing zoning here. That's all we're doing today.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
zoning. Well, Mike might say flip it, but once you've got a public company like Consolidated that is a local company that's buying on the beach like this, you can reach your own conclusions. Legally, is the question, can they sell the land? Anybody can sell their land. I mean, that's part of the way things work in America for most of us. At least most of us value that. So yes, they could, but try to reach the practical and logical conclusions about it. And the answer is, I think that these folks will be involved in having something built here that'll be quality.
I think either you or the other gentleman, I think referenced that when you first started, that normally you would be bringing a set of plans for what you're asking to do. So can I just ask you this? Is this a change in protocol for rezoning?
It is.
Maybe you could enlighten all of us a little bit, and maybe we'd understand why you're doing it
Be
differently.
happy to. So I'm not sure. I've been in front of this board several times, but I'm not sure that I've been here since the code changed. So we spent, like I said, 4 or 5 years back and forth with the local all the other local governments affected, the chambers, the realtors, the bankers, the people who are affected by zoning, and the citizens, in large part, to come up with a new code here. And it's been in effect for less than a year. 850 or so pages of new code. We're all still kind of digesting that elephant. A big piece of it, though, is what I'm bringing you tonight, which is a form-based proposal for zoning on a piece of property that doesn't have to be a building plan. We changed the code, and frankly, it's the new normal for everybody. Every other city in this county does it some version of that. In other words, a much more generalized concept for PD zoning than Daytona's done for 25 plus years. So you guys have seen me up here with architectural plans and building plans and exact locations of engineering, where the stormwater ponds are going, where the exact parking spots are going to be. We don't do that anymore. It's pretty recent, within the past year. So it's not just me coming up with a new idea for this one project. It's a new code we're operating under.
Well, I think that is very enlightening, and I think if maybe a lot of us would have known that before, maybe you wouldn't get so much criticism for not having. In other words, what you're saying here is we changed the building codes, and when we changed the building codes, it allowed this type of proposal to be made.
The land development code. And so we're going through some growing
legally
pains.
Before it couldn't be done.
Couldn't be done.
Oh, that's really enlightening. I mean, personally, that makes a big difference to me.
Well, I got people doubting me in the back, so I'll let Reed, you're the expert, or Dennis, you.
You could not legally make a proposal like this before the land codes were changed, and all the land codes all the land codes in all the cities.
Rich, either one of you guys.
All the land codes in all the cities around us do these types of proposals now.
Yeah, so let me just say real quick, and then these guys can say yes or no. At the end of the day, we had a very specific set of plans that had to come in with a PD rezoning request. When the land development code changed, that became much more generalized. The plans that we bring forward are not development plans that are fully engineered. That's not the way it's done anymore. I had a fairly painful growth process with the City Commission a few months ago when they realized that. Another project had come through and done the same thing they've done for 25 years, and the planning board said, get out. And, Mike's referring to it, I think. Told Jim Morrison, his client, we're not doing it. Well, at the end of the day, they had every right to do it under the new code, but people hadn't absorbed the new code yet. So, yes, there's a growing pain involved. Rich, I'll let you say yes or no to that, but things have changed, so you're the authority, not me.
Well, the other half of this is the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan establishes the framework. They're asking to modify that. That's a decision that a city commission will have to make. Then in terms of the plan development, yes, there was a conscious decision in the new code to allow for entitlements, standards, framework for what would be there. with the details to be developed after the entitlement is done. So this is consistent with what our code says now from a zoning standpoint.
And I have a question. So, as Mr. Merrill said, all the other cities, or most of the other cities around us, their code and their proposals now are following this protocol that you're using. Is that?
I'm not familiar with.
I practice all around the area, and I can tell you that they're all different, obviously. But the level of detail of a plan that came with a plan development rezoning in Daytona Beach was much higher than the rest of them. They all have different variations,
Okay.
but they were much more general.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill.
I have a question, please.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Merrill.
One of the things that came up was what kind of commitment are they going to have to this conceptual plan? I think that the conceptual plan appeals to everyone. I think they'd like some assurance that that's a plan that they're going to stick to. What if any commitment is there to that?
It's a good question, and what I was trying to lead to was it's not so much the plan that creates the commitment; it's the agreement in the PD document. So, although we're not dissecting the actual agreement here tonight because that's not the way this is done in this procedure. The plans are an illustration of what the commitments are. For instance, the biggest one that I've told you about is having an acre of green space on the beach that has access to the public. That's written in the agreement. The second view corridor that we talked about, whether they flip or not, and the access on the north side, those are things that are written in that agreement. The setbacks for the activating of the pedestrian area on A1A, that's in the agreement. The variation on the heights are required. The changes in the height are required by distance in the agreement. Those are a few of the concepts that are out there. The landscape, the required landscaping is required as a listed element. So much like any other PD, those things are on the list in the agreement, and the mayor signs one, and his boss signs the other. So it becomes a written contract that becomes part of our zoning. That's the way this works. So the plans won't be, again, the plan piece versus the written agreement piece is much more loose and flexible. It's concepts like you've looked at. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Okay. If there's anything else, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear back from the affected parties, if it's possible, please, if they have anything to add. It's a public comment, just affected parties.
It's a response.
It's a response, yeah. A response.
Rob, we're following the procedure set
whatever,
forth.
yeah, exactly, yeah. If you want to respond to what Mr. Merrill has been saying, please.
Hi, Susan Bousquet again from Lenox Avenue. I keep going back in my own mind to Section 5, permitted uses, and that list goes on for nearly a whole page, maybe a little more than a whole page. And so how do you distinguish between a concept and a commitment when the permitted uses could be a radio or television studio, a library or a museum, a daycare center, a place of worship? This is a long list. It's very hard for me to understand how we have a concept that is so broad and lengthy in scope that it's kind of anything goes. I'm not sure I have responded to your responses, and I'm not sure that I'm the best qualified group to
So
make
the way this is going to go, we're going to
Yes.
have responses. We've done the applicant,
Yes.
the affected party, if city staff has any, and then we're going to have conclusions. So you're going to have another shot, Rob.
Exactly.
Okay. May I ask if there are any of my neighbors who are better equipped to answer this than I am?
No, you are the
No,
representative
you're
for your.
yes, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okay. You want to?
Okay.
You want to have a chance to
No,
respond?
hold
Yeah.
I'll just answer the one question about the list.
That's fine.
It's the T1 district that's already, all these things are allowed, like an antenna. They're already allowed in the district there now.
Can I add, though, that the use list that you were looking at has been whittled down. So the most recent list has taken some things off. Since
That's correct.
You read that since we had our neighborhood meeting and you got that list. Okay. So we've been going back and forth with the staff. So this part of this process now under this new code includes a mandatory neighborhood meeting before we get to the planning board and before we get to the redevelopment board. But in that process, a lot of times the what I call the wash and rinse cycle that we go through with the technical review team at the city hall involves input from the fire chief and input from the utilities department and input from the planning department. And along the way, we have a neighborhood meeting. Well, sometime between that and when we get here, we're still going through back and forth with the technical folks, and it resulted in several uses being taken out. So I'd like to give you an updated use list before we leave tonight. So several of them that I think you might have found offensive. I mean, daycare centers, there are certain things in there that you might not think fit there, but again, they were part of that laundry list that came off that T1, but we whittled it down. So just to make everybody comfortable with those.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Yes, staff, please.
I just want to note that it is 6 o'clock. Typically at this point we'd be having a planning board meeting for anyone listening. Anyone in the audience that just arrived that was here for the planning board meeting, that will be occurring immediately following this meeting, just so everyone's informed that that will be taking place, and there is a pretty large agenda for the planning board. So
we have a conclusion.
Yep. So now we're conclusions. If applicant, affected party, or staff has any brief statements they'd like to make, go ahead.
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think okay. Thank you. No comment. Thank you.
So then,
now we go to closing hearing.
We close the public hearing, and it's up for the board's discussion.
So the public hearing closed, and then we go to the board members. Mr. Newman, please. Thank you. Ms.
I enjoyed hearing from the public their concerns, and by having a little back and forth, I kind of understand a little bit better and some of the questions that were answered today. I know the way it's zoned right now, there's certain things that are allowed, so I think it's good to ask the questions that you asked so that they can be answered and people get a better understanding as to what we're dealing with here. Other than that, I have no other remarks.
Thank you, Sigan. Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is where we should discuss what's going on right now in front of us and not just let it slide by. People out there have a good point. There's a lot of gray area in this, and I think they have a really good point. And I don't know if it's where we sit down, maybe we should ask if we can amend this agreement. Maybe we can do a time constraint, removal of what they were not liking with the bars, and maybe get a little bit more. I know he said he was going to do an updated list of what they were going to have. Yeah.
I think they've already committed. They've removed the bars and the nightclubs.
I mean, where we sit right now is an advisory board towards city council. What we agree on is still going to go over our head, and they're still going to talk about it. Yes. Just like Screamers Inc. We voted unanimously that to be turned down, and it went right over our head, and it's still being built. So right now what we're just saying is that we should listen to the neighborhood that has shown up in full force today, and I think this really needs to be talked about a little bit more, especially with city council. That's probably where we need to be going from here. Am I right about this? Or I mean, it's just letting this fly by. And
you're going to take 2 votes on these items. They're recommendations to the planning board. Planning board will take that into consideration in their deliberations. They will make a recommendation to the city commission. If there's certain messages you want them to know about your concerns, you should address them now.
Okay, I would like to, maybe if we can amend it so that there is they said 5 years, if that could be definitely in writing, and I like the idea of if it to be sold, parcel to be sold to another property, the removal of what we already agree upon.
Well, we can't tie it to ownership. So these are, it's the zoning of the property. These are the permitted uses for the land, and we can't tie it to ownership.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Yes, please.
I think this is extraordinary. I think this is a breakthrough for this area because for too long, the way we've developed is ready, fire, aim. And we put a building down there, we pop it down there, we review it, yes or no. It doesn't work. When you're in a design process, you start with the parameters. And in those parameters, you start to build the pieces. The pieces get built into specifics to the point where finally you're at the doorknobs. And I think this process that we're doing tonight, which is different from what I understand we were doing before, is just that kind of a process. And as far as commitment, I can't imagine more commitment than Tomoka has made here, buying that piece of property and spending a lot of money on these very expensive architects. They better be expensive because he's done a great job, I think. I'll get a raise for it. But what they're showing here is not just the fact that they bought this property and they have a commitment to the beachfront, but they've gone so far as to point out, I think in fairly deep specifics, of what the direction they want to go with this is. And I like the direction. First of all, they're sacrificing a lot of frontage, which people seem to think is godliness. They are showing a richness of approach, different heights and so forth. It goes way past what we've seen for too long, which is a straight, the shores for a perfect example. The beach is brought back to the street in a very special way. And I think it's a chance for Daytona to finally start to do something the right way with a process, starting with the beginning and going to the finish. And I think I commend Tomoka and the architects for having done a great job in presenting to us what we think will be the beginning of a wonderful forward movement, which will be reviewed time and time again before it's done. This isn't the last word, but I think we've got to let these people go forward with an idea of what they're working with in general so that they can get forward into the process of bringing to people what these buildings will look like. And I think from everything I've seen, it predicts a terrific success. I even like the idea that parallelogram lets those long buildings run east-west so the shadow across the beach doesn't become an issue for everybody anymore, and that all of the sense of the juxtaposition of functions, I think, has been extraordinarily well thought out. And I'm very much in favor of voting for it, and I think we ought to do it tonight.
I want to say that I completely agree with you on everything you said. It seems to me that the objections are against the wrong people. If you've got objections, I don't have objections to it. But it's legally been passed and put into our codes that they can make this type of proposal, a conceptual, more schematic proposal. And our codes are legal laws that we follow. And this company, Tomoka, is following the laws and allowing them to make this type of proposal. So for you to object to the type of proposal doesn't make any sense to me. I know that many people in here don't want like the tall buildings, and I have a sense that it's perhaps that if we'd come with full plans, that would have been the objection by many people, is the too tall of buildings. But what's really going on here tonight is we're being asked legally to recommend the proposal that's legally been made under the code laws. And I, for one, I'm not going to deny somebody their right that legally made a proposal. I like the proposal, so I would feel badly denying you that based upon the fact that it's too conceptual, because our own land code laws allow it to be conceptual. So that's how I feel about it. I don't, in good conscience, I don't think I could not approve it if I like the project, and I do. So I think we're bound to support this because they've followed the laws that we ourselves have written. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all the citizens for showing up. I'd like to thank Mr. Merrill for a presentation and Robert. And number one, I'd like to thank Tomoka for taking a chance on the Beachside. That's the number one. But what I'm hearing here is that people are not against the design or not against what it looks like. It's not, the negative is not made against the way it looks. The negative is made against the height, and then there is no plans. Well, first of all, the reason there's no plans, it's not the applicant's fault. The city changed the whole book. The whole book, and believe me, it's 891 pages that is very hard to swallow. It is very hard to swallow. Not only for a citizen like me, but even for professionals. And it's like, even for the city, they're going through some pain to trying to, so it's not the applicants that we have to blame. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to make some comments, and those are my personal comments. My comments are, how many projects are we going to turn down on Beachside before we fill up all these empty spaces. Every day we drive by, every day, all we see is, now that the city allowing no fences, so all we see is a lot of empty land, except the project that were permitted a couple of months ago, and even that, it's taking a long time for them to come to break ground. So what I'm asking the citizen is, let's embrace whoever comes and wants to do something on Beachside. I understand that, we don't want to block we don't want to high density, we don't want to do big, but if people will take the time to look at the city book and read it and see, maybe we need to sometimes change some things in it and make it easier for the applicants and for the business and for the citizen to work together. Right now, anybody that comes and wants to put up a building, they got to go through a lot of pain and hire some attorneys and pay a lot of money and do beautiful design. This is beautiful designs, and I've seen some beautiful design that were turned down because of the code and because of the zoning. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, and I keep saying this at every meeting, and I want to say it again, we all want the same thing for our community. We all got to work together. We all got to hold hands. Tomoka invested in this community, and there's a gentleman that says, well, they got to answer to their board members. Well, let me tell you what, they got to perform to answer to their board members. If they didn't see a potential in Daytona on the Beachside, they would not have invested in the Beachside. I know I'm invested on the Beachside, and believe me, it is a very painful Beachside to bring people in because of the code, because of the zoning, because of the way things changed around here. So what I'm saying is, let's try to all work together. Now, I agree, there's a couple of questions that I had myself is, how many jobs is this going to create? That's the number one thing. Then the second question, I think is Mr. Newman that asked and Mr. Merrill answered, is the 5 years commitment. 5 years go by fast. And if we look at I was involved in CRA and I was involved in those. The CRA is zero right now. Now it's starting to come up. A little bit more dollars are coming in. So if we want a beautification of the Beachside, we have to give an olive branch to the developers. But at the same time, they can't do whatever they want. I agree. I'm the first one to say, because I went through the pain to do whatever the city wanted me to do. But we cannot keep turning these developers down. We can't, or else it's going to take another 15, 20 years and still have the same fencing and the same. Most of the fencing happened in 2004. We're in 2016. All these fencing were put up because of the hurricane. We're in 2016. And it's still, I don't want to say it looks worse, but it still looks the same. To drive by on A1A and to see cranes, it puts a lot of smile on people, because it seems like things are moving. Not as fast as people want it to be, but at least something is happening. So I want to praise Tomoka for what they're doing. I give them all the credit for taking a chance on LPGN 95. A lot of people wrote that off many, many years ago. They believed in it, and we saw the result. To the point where now you have CarMax and there's no more room. So that's going to be a main area. But we have to believe, too, that there's 30 million people that drive every year through that. That might bring us a little bit of people by all the project that Tomoka put. So I believe that, this project is good, is a good project. Obviously, we still need to see some plans, but it's not the applicant's fault. It's because of the way things are working with the city, the book, the way it was written down, that they have to go through this process. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would give it all my support, but I still would like Mr. Merrill to say that commitment was for 5 years, and 5 years. I'll take your word for it, Mr. Merrill. And I'm sorry. Yeah, no,
it's in the agreement.
Yes, no, but I believe it's the 5 years, and 5 years go by fast. And the second thing is, let's think about the job creation that this project is going to do for A1A. This is a big thing. I said it a couple of meetings ago. Cocoa Beach gets more money from the state than we do, and we contribute more to the state. because we have less full all year round residents. That's the way Tallahassee works. We contribute billions of dollars, but we get less back. Why? Because we have less than 65,000 residents. But Cocoa Beach gets more money because they have more residents all year round. But so if we get in good jobs, good paying jobs, and create jobs like this project and other project coming up, we should be up there. We should be getting back a lot of money from the state that we contribute. So as far as I'm concerned, I think I said enough. I support this project. I mean, it would be foolish not to support it, you know. At the same time, we still got to have a lot of work to be done on it, and a lot of homework and a lot of meetings. And we'd love to see plans, Mr. Merrill. You know, same thing with Tomoka. I mean, we would love, obviously, you heard this from everybody. That is the main thing that everybody. Now, I can tell you one thing. Somebody made something about flipping the property. Yeah, that is a good point, flipping the property. But I don't think Tomoka is going to make a commitment for 5 years and try to get as many rezoning as possible and then flip it. That would not give them a good rep in this community. They got a good name. I don't think they would do that. That's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but again, you know, they're going to make a lot more money by doing this project in the long term than just flipping it over and, you know, rezoning it and flipping it over. That's what I have to say. So, in that, yes, Mrs. Sorry about that. Go ahead, please.
I passed on my comment because I thought we needed to go through really quickly and vote.
Yeah.
But after listening to everybody's comment, I want to say that
Yes.
I'm very much in favor of this project. I think
Thank
it's
you.
tremendous. It's what we need in that area, and so it's really great to have it. Well, I hope it happens in 5 years or even less. Thank you.
I have one question. I think maybe I'm understanding this just a little bit more. Tomoka is a land development company, so they're going to develop the land and they're going to sell it to construction companies and builders who are going to build the buildings. Is that correct, or are they going to be doing the construction?
There's lots of different ways it can happen. So I don't want to say that, you know, people have had this stigma of people flipping land, like it's some sort of bad thing.
That's not what I'm asking, Mr. Merrill. What I'm trying to say here is, a land development company would not come with plans for buildings because they may well and probably will sell the different parts of this land to the different construction companies and the investors and the builders, the hotel company, the residential multifamily company, the retail. So they're just developing the land, and they're going to probably sell to other companies.
Which is a possibility and not a bad thing.
Yeah,
right?
so you wouldn't come here with building plans, would you?
They might. In other words, Consolidated may decide that they want to actually invest in building, but they could also do a long-term land lease. They could do a sale. Okay. There's a lot of ways it can happen. Yes. We just want something to happen, right?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Thank you.
I mean, something.
Okay. Any other comments from yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I move we accept.
We have a motion to accept. I'm sorry.
So I think we were going to vote on them separately.
Separately, yes.
So
There's two items. Okay. On the first item. We have a motion on the first item.
I moved the first item. You wanted to give the lingo?
Sure, to approve the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment as presented.
Yes, we got a first motion. Second, Mr. Cizilli. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All in favor say no. Not in favor? Nobody. All in favor. We got six. Everybody passed it, yes. 7, sorry. Everybody passed it, 7.
Oh, right.
Sorry, 6. Right. So 6. Yes. Yeah. All in favor, please. Could we vote on the second one, please?
I moved the second one, and she'll tell you what.
Rezoning to PDRD Longboard DEV 2016-074.
We got a motion.
I'll second that.
Second. Ms. Carden, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All in favor. All not in favor say no. No. Nobody. All 6-0.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to take so much time. Appreciate it, though.
Thank you. I guess we better leave.
Yeah.
Hold on. I think we have the staff.
Yeah, we're on 6 redevelopment project updates.
I'm taking a pass if you don't mind.
No.
On comments?
Yes, please.
You still got to give see if there's any public.
Yes, exactly. There's any other public comment? Nope. Mr. Reed?
Board comments?
Any other board comment? Nope. No, could we get we're going to pass on the update? You can pass on the update. Okay. Oh, this meeting's adjourned. Just kidding for you, Mr. Berger.
Thank you.